Welcome again, everybody. We're going to get started. I'm very excited about our guest today. Ross really has a unique background. Not only has he been a founder, currently the head of product for a company called LimaCharlie that just did their own round of funding. He's been in the midst of companies that have where he's ran product. He's running product now, as I mentioned, for LimaCharlie. He's also an investor. He's an advisor, and now he's the writer of the book of a book about all of these experiences called Cyber for Builders. And we're going to have a wide-ranging conversation today, which I'm excited about. And let's just jump right in, Ross. Tell us, why in the heck did you decide to write a book, which is no small feat? And welcome, Ross.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Why write a book? That is a fantastic question. I think the book is really, it's an organic next step after the blog that I have been writing for about 2.5 years. So just to give you a quick background and a quick context here, I have been leading product for a number of years, and I've worked across different industries. So I was in e-commerce, retail, wholesale, financial technology. And when I ended up in cybersecurity, when I joined LimaCharlie, what I came to realize is that me being new to security means that I have to go and I have to get myself up to speed as quickly as possible. So I was attending different events. I was talking to everybody who was willing to talk to me. I was reaching out to people. I was reading a lot, books, online media, analyst reports, and so on and so forth. And what I came to realize was that although there was a lot of very great technical content about the technical side of cybersecurity, there was relatively little about the business side of the industry. And me being on the business side, I was interested in understanding, how does it look like? Like how are the products being built in this space? Like how are they taken to market? What works? What doesn't? Like which go-to-market strategies have failed? Which succeeded? And why? And all of those small things. So that's how I started the blog. There was no initial plan to start a blog. Instead, I just had enough material so that I could write one article, and then a bunch of people reached out and said, "Hey, that was quite useful. How about you do more of it?" And so I did more. And over time, I ended up with a very active blog. And I want to say around June, or somewhere between like June and September last year, I was thinking, and a good friend asked me, "Hey, why don't you write a book?" And I was like, "Oh my God, that sounds scary. I don't have time to do it. I simply don't have time." Because the blog itself is a Saturday, Sunday project. So I still want to have some life. And then what I came to realize after some reflection was that I already have about 25% of the book inside the blog. So if I can use that as a foundation, if I can leverage some of my past writing and then build on top of that, it becomes much easier for me to get together a book. So that's what I did. And I guess a more direct answer, why write a book? Because I felt like there is a need for something that talks about building cybersecurity companies and cybersecurity startups. There are many great books. If you go to Amazon, there are many great books about how to implement specific security defenses, how to build cybersecurity infrastructure, how to do security. But what there wasn't anything about prior to this book is about how to build security companies and how to take innovation to market.
Well, Ross, I as you know, I've read the book.
Have you?
I am a startup CEO, although I did another startup in the past. It was not in cyber, nor was it product. And also, I should say, I did not have any investors, so I didn't have to pitch venture capital folks. So while I've read a lot of the more standard books for venture capital investing and those sorts of things, I just give you a tremendous amount of credit on how this book, for a founder like myself, or certainly even a lot of different folks with different perspectives, you get a tremendous amount from your book. Even just the piece about product, the chapters about product and product market fit and all those famous buzzwords, that what do they really mean in a practical sense. I just really applaud you for the books and thank you for doing it. That's not just because you're on here. This is good stuff. Ross, one of the things you mentioned, the challenge of the time that it took to even do this, because even the blog, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but your decision to do it is helping lots of folks. But how has it impacted, or has it impacted LimaCharlie from your business? And what, if anything, during your research, have you changed in the way you're operating in the business that you're the head of product?
Yeah, so that is a good question. I think for me, like one of the trickier parts, if I'm honest, is really just trying to keep things separate. So I am a head of product at LimaCharlie, but and that's my main area of focus. That said, like all the the blogs and the books and all that stuff, it's really just my side projects, entirely separate, entirely away from LimaCharlie, not at all connected. Like some of the ideas, of course, like they do inform my work quite a bit, but they don't necessarily translate into, like they don't necessarily sort of intermingle between the two. So I think, see, in my case, you see, there are people who sit down with the goal of writing a book, and in my case, the book was really a byproduct of of me just learning about the industry. So I don't know if it changed my thinking about product management. I think it highlighted some of the more obvious parts about it. You see, I would actually be quite curious to hear about your experience, like building companies outside of cybersecurity. But before I ask you questions, the part that is different in cybersecurity is that there is a lot. Like, well, first of all, cybersecurity is primarily B2B, and a lot of the best practices about product management, they mostly come from the B2C experiences, right? Like you read about product management and you're told, oh, why don't you do some A/B testing? Why don't you do like cohort analysis? Why don't you do some customer research? And then in practice, the vast majority of cybersecurity products has a small number of customers, has a fairly well-defined buyer persona, and those buyers, they're too busy to talk to product people, they're too busy to talk to CEOs, they're too busy to do some ideation and to do even design partnerships. So for me, I think working on this book has really reinforced some of the learnings about product, and more importantly about building in cybersecurity more broadly.
Mm-hmm. Well, you and I met, I'm trying to remember if it was 2 or 3 years ago, but Sunil Yu was hosting his Cyber Defense Matrix project, and it was about 80 of us that were invited, and so that's, I think, where we first met. And I have never seen anybody, you, and there's probably one other guy, I think his name is Chris Hughes, who's done such a great job of just putting information out to help the industry after doing the homework and creating a presence and really bringing value to the industry. So, as you threw yourself in and started to get the following that you've received, what has been good and or bad about that in your experience? And before you answer that, just a quick note to the viewers here. We're going to talk about the book, but we're also going to really get into the cybersecurity ecosystem and how vendors can help each other and help clients. And so there is certainly, whether you're here because of the interest in Startup Founder or a user of cybersecurity products, we're going to have a little bit of all of it, but we're starting with the book. So Ross, back to that question on just once you start to get that high of a profile, what have you noticed? People like me asking you to sit on webinars like this. What's been the good and the bad for you?
Yeah, like transparently, I don't think I have a high profile. That's you see, there's some people who spend their time thinking, how do I become quote unquote the social media influencer? I'm not at all a social media person. And I know you would never be able to tell that, because I'm quite active on LinkedIn. That said, LinkedIn is also the only social media I have or I use. Like I never had Instagram in my life. Like never did. Like the other day, I was asking a friend what an Instagram story is because I've never seen that. I stopped using Facebook like completely. Facebook. Facebook Messenger, Facebook app, like Facebook anything, in about, I think, 2015. So just about 9 years ago at this point. So I'm not a fan of social media. Again, I like the utility of it and the fact that it can help you, stay connected. Uh, but I don't have the time to, browse through bottomless feeds and see what updates people are posting. I simply don't. And so for me, LinkedIn specifically has been a very, for me, using LinkedIn has been a very pragmatic decision of saying, okay, if I do need to have some public presence. And because I do want to do it, what should I prioritize? Like, I've looked at Twitter as a platform, and frankly, I find that or X now, how it's called, I find that for you to be active on Twitter/X, you have to dedicate quite a bit of time to it. You have to truly, follow and be very, very active in that space. And in general, that ecosystem didn't quite speak to me. LinkedIn is interesting because it's a very professionally focused platform. So just being somebody interested in in business and business growth and professional growth, it just made sense for me to double down on LinkedIn. I didn't start by just posting stuff. Like, I'm somebody who, if I have something to share, if I have something that I believe somebody else would find useful, I'll post it. If I don't, I won't. Like, that's why you may see that I'm not at all active for like a week and a half, and then after that week and a half, I'll share something on a higher frequency. I think I don't subscribe to the idea that you have to, like, spend your time, grow engagement, do all of that stuff. It's, I think you, with any social media and with anything else you do, like, you building some community, some ecosystem around yourself is a byproduct of you having something valuable to say, having something important to do. And I do believe that people would really benefit by being people. I think people don't leverage social media to its fullest ability. And like, too many assume that, oh, like, LinkedIn is just, it's too transactional, it's all about self promotion, and it's all about business promotion and all of that stuff. And by coming up to that determination, people miss out on the opportunity to connect with others. People miss out on the opportunity to expand their network. And I think it's important to be present in the public media. As to what's good and what's bad about it, I mean, what's good about it is that it opens a lot of doors. Not in the way in which some people expect, but mostly because you share something interesting. Somebody connects with you. You now have an individual that knows about the work you do, that knows about the opinion or the ideas you share. And there is some compound effect to that, because what starts as just an agenda-free engagement on social media can result in building a very interesting community and a very interesting network that you would not have otherwise met. Like, I met so many people through social media that I then end up connecting with in person on events like RSA, events like Black Hat, events like DEF CON. And it's almost become a tradition for me to first meet people digitally before I meet them in the physical world, not the other way around. What's bad about it is that it does require some conscious effort. It does require some engagement. It sometimes results in like more messages than you can answer, which means that you end up ignoring those messages. So but LinkedIn to me is like a whack-a-mole, right? You answered one message and then there's another 10 popped up, and
Well, Ross, one of the things that I also, and then we're going to move on from the book here, two quick things as we wrap up this portion. First, again, one of the things that I've appreciated about you is when you have connected with people and you go travel, like you came to Seattle and you set up a meet and greet with whatever. I think there were 10 original people that were on the invite going to get together. So, these are things that I like about our industry, and you're certainly an example of trying to bring network together. Even if some of these folks won't be competitors, there's an awful big problem we're trying to deal with in cyber. And anyway, I applaud you for what you've been doing. I have submitted this just so folks know, as far as other reading books about cyber. There's something called the Cybersecurity Canon. A guy named Rick Howard started it when he was a chief security officer at Palo Alto Networks. It's now hosted over at Ohio State. I think we're going to put up a link there for you. I've submitted this book to the Canon. I don't know that it's up there yet, Ross.
Thank you.
But there's a Hall of Fame here. But from a standpoint of when I first got into cyber back 15 or 16, I was made aware of this cybersecurity canon, and it has a huge number of books that have been reviewed by CISOs. It's just a fantastic resource if you want to go learn about cyber from lots of different perspectives. So that was very helpful for me, and we need to get this book in that group sooner than later. So.
Thank you.
So with that, Ross, let's switch to sort of the ecosystem. And one of the things that we've talked about, and I always appreciate your direct feedback, but when you get into the VC community and it's cybersecurity, there's so much competition. And one of the things, before I joined DarkLight and invested in DarkLight, I went back to the person who introduced me to it. And at the time, I won't share the name of the company, but another company, this is in 2017, they just got a $50 million raise at a valuation of $600 million, and I couldn't understand the math. And I had some inside information that the vast majority of that 50 million was going to go to marketing. And it was an AI company. And I just literally felt this is a race for marketing dollars, not real tech impact or change impact to what we're providing. And so I almost completely bailed from cybersecurity at that point because of the how much money it takes to really do it or the perceived amount of money it takes to build a company from a marketing perspective, as opposed to having real solid solutions and sort of an old school approach, which was my last company, which is we're going to be profitable. Strange concept. So during your research and as you wrote the book, and I fully understand why people will not be profitable, they got to grab market share, et cetera, et cetera. But what frustrates you or what has challenged you the most about the industry and sort of how it works with that, product to client to VC sort of mix?
Mm-hmm. It is an interesting point you're mentioning around the amount of marketing dollars and just the percentage of the company budget that has to be allocated towards that area. I think part of the reasons why that is the case is because cybersecurity needs tend to not be as well understood on the market as the needs in other areas. Like, for example, if you are let's just say if you're a marketing department, that you need the ability for you to reach out to prospects. You need the ability to broaden, the number of communities and the types of individuals you're reaching. You need the ability to be more targeted with your ICP. You need the ability to engage with your prospects. You need the ability to engage with your customers, and so those needs are fairly well understood. And so anytime there is like a new social media platform or a new marketing channel, you will always be looking proactively for ways for you to tap into those resources. But when it comes to cybersecurity, the reality is that people are not necessarily actively trying to find the new ideas and the new problem areas. We're still as an industry, we're fairly reactive. We are responding to what's out there instead of trying to anticipate, because we are more on the back end of securing the business, not on the front, trying to identify innovative ideas and trying to generate revenue. And so because CISOs and security leaders and security practitioners are not exactly going out there saying, oh my God, what's being discussed at DEF CON, what's being discussed, and besides, what new tools what new cool ideas I would need to try. There is none of that happening. Instead, there is a number of problems that people have to respond to reactively. And because there is none of that marketing pool, companies have to spend money to do the push, right? They have to educate the customers that, hey, this problem area is real and they should be paying attention to it. It works very differently if you are selling like a solution for, for sales teams, solution for finance teams, because then like, if they have a problem, they will be looking for solutions actively and they will recognize that problem. In cybersecurity, you have to educate the market that there are problems. As for the overall, the industry trends, the ecosystem, and what frustrates me, I don't know if there is anything that specifically frustrates me, but there are some observations that I think are interesting in the way in which they impact the company's ability to succeed. So the way I often think about it is, any startup needs to find an initial wedge, an initial way in before it expands into something larger, right? And there is this sentiment in the industry that like, oh, there are so many products that are really just features, so we shouldn't be building features, we should instead be building products. And I do agree with that sentiment. I think in isolation it's a very smart, commentary. But in reality, every product starts with a feature, every platform starts with a product, right? So the difference is that sometimes people who want to build a large platform, or who want to build like a very large and broad and like holistic solution, they still need to figure out what is going to be that initial wedge, what that will enable them to gain some initial traction, gain the market share. And then once they have that wedge, what is that, the next use case that they should be tackling that is still somewhat, close to their initial use case, but allows them to expand. And so the process of forming a company is actually a process. While there is this sentiment in the industry that like, oh my God, like everything is just, those features everywhere. That I think that's the piece that's a bit frustrating, because when you look at the companies that are known today as like large platforms, they all started by just solving one specific problem for one specific
Let me pull that thread, Ross, because I'm intrigued on this, because I have actually been fairly harsh with even the VC community for lack of an imagination, is the way I would put it, in cyber, because it is a very complex problem with a lot of moving parts. And what I have seen, and I think you're actually opened my eyes to it, perhaps a new perspective that maybe I shouldn't be as harsh. But my point was to this large VC group I was meeting with. This is a couple of years ago. Maybe that's why they all said no to me when I was pitching them. But in any event, I suggested that I think the stat was, from whatever source, a medium to large size business has an average of 71 different cybersecurity tools in their ecosystem. Mm-hmm. Just yesterday, amazingly, we were with a very large organization. I can't share the name, of course, but they had over 160 different cybersecurity related tools in their ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And one of the things, and one of the reasons I think that has occurred, is perhaps the way you're putting it is people were trying to just do features and not platforms and products. But the VC community and the investors, because this is such a complex problem, like folks to come in and say, this is the problem, which is very defined, and this is the solution, which is very defined. And so we are going to solve for phishing email or, ransomware, which means a lot of things, but, and so that has created these individual silos that requires now a company to bring in 70 plus tools to have the total coverage. And so, that's kind of where I've pushed back on the VC community, like saying, hey, let's get a little bit more imaginative here and buy onto these big visions of, maybe this holy grail of single pane of glass, or however people talk about it, might be a little too far out, but let's at least start really bringing this stuff together. And what I'm intrigued, go ahead, Ross.
So I'm very curious. So like, let's double click on this. See, I understand what you're describing. I'm curious if there is another way to do it. Like each of those 70 tools is a reaction, is a response to a specific need on the market. So if there was no solution for that need, what would the alternative look like? Is it that, hey, everybody, chill out and wait until this big vendor 4 years from now builds this capability, like all calm down, like we have to wait until like Palo Alto or like Microsoft adds it, or is like what's the viable alternative that doesn't result in the number of tools?
Well, let me share. So when I was getting into this, I read two books. The 1%, no, sorry, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel.
Mm-hmm.
And then what is it? The Fast Startup, or it's sort of the famous one that anyway, the two theories of the books, and the other one will come to me because it's like the most famous product book out there.
Mm-hmm.
About startups, and it's the one theory, 0 to 1. Peter Thiel's theory is, hey, go out there, create a big vision, and go all in. Like,
mm-hmm.
let's do revolutionary products, not evolutionary products.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this, starving startup or smart startup or whatever the heck it's called, it's all about, hey, have an idea, make it work, and then iterate super fast based on the customers telling you what they need, and iterate accordingly. And so in one version story, you start with, I'm going to solve this problem, and then your clients basically take you down whatever path they take you.
Mm-hmm.
And in the other extreme is, no, we're going to solve a problem that's huge and go big. And so what we ended up deciding to do here at DarkLight was, in theory, the best of both worlds. We have the big grand vision. And so we have guide rails when we talk about our vision and going, we use Mount Rainier because I'm from Seattle, climbing up the mountain. Here's the vision. And we know where the top is. We believe what we need to build. But the guide rails are, we're going to let our clients help us determine the path up the hill. Mm-hmm. So for example, we're going to bring in more adversary threat intelligence information and be able to create adversary playbooks more efficiently first before we improve the, round trip integration with ServiceNow for ticketing. So both of those things have to happen in DarkLight's product SIO, but the prioritization of how we're going to climb the mountain will be dictated by the client. And so that's sort of an example of what we're doing. And I think that, back to your point, though, your question or your comment is, I think one of the things that by us having that vision, one of the things that we know is we're going to have to play well with others. The lean startup, whoever put that out there. Yes, the lean startup is what it's called. We have to play well with others because we're going to rely on other vendor products and tools. We want other products and tools to rely on us. And so we're really, for a small company startup, we probably spend more time on standards than we maybe should. But that's an example of, even if you're starting to solve one problem, to be good to the industry, let's start focusing on the standards. Let's not necessarily name your own threat intelligence, group your own name, because the industry then has to figure out, well, is it the same one? Is it not? Let's be really friendly to the ecosystem. Even if we're solving a problem, how's it going to plug into the greater ecosystem later? So that would be sort of my comments to what you said.
It does make sense, and I do think that as an industry, we have to be smart about how we build the infrastructure for the future and how we design companies. That said, there are two pieces that I would probably like to mention. One is that I do genuinely believe that every single one, like you mentioned, that every enterprise has like 70 plus tools. I do believe that every single one of those tools has a big vision. And that's just the reality, right? Obviously there are some that are maybe built as shorter term projects with some other ideas in mind, but the vast majority of the founders do have a big vision, and yet in order for them to make that vision happen, they have to find that initial small wedge, that initial way in, which will enable them to grow into that big vision, right? Like Palo Alto was a firewalls company. Right. So you don't build this large platform out of nowhere. You build it by identifying an area where you're more likely to succeed and to get started, so that you can get started, and then expanding from there. So the reality is that, like, those 71 or however many vendors, each of them has a big vision. It's just they picked an area to start, and that area happened to to tackle a specific need that an enterprise has. Now, if we follow this thought process, I think that's where we realize what a lot of the challenges are, because each of those 71 vendors has their own bigger vision. They're all trying to expand into adjacent areas, right? They don't just want to be that one feature, that one solution. They want to solve the solutions that other 70 vendors are solving. And so, but because they're doing it all at the same time, an average enterprise ends up in the place where they have 70 plus tools, and each of those 70 plus tools gets in by doing one job really well, and then tries to expand into the other 70 directions, right? Because they want to do more. They want to consolidate. Everybody wants to consolidate everything. And so that's really just the market dynamics. Like I understand why that would not be ideal, but I frankly struggle to picture an alternative to it. And then the second piece that I want to mention is that we often talk about investors from this perspective that, oh, like VCs have to start doing things differently, better, because we cannot mature the industry unless they do, because we cannot do this or we cannot do that. And I think that that's a very misguided stance. I think the reality is that VC is it's a financial model. VCs don't owe anything to cybersecurity industry or to any other industry. They're in it to make money and to return capital to their own investors, to their limited partners, right? And so when you think about it from that perspective, then it starts to make sense that an average VC is obviously going to be trying to make bets that will maximize their profits, and not necessarily to mature the industry or to move the industry forward in the way in which practitioners would like it to be. Well, it's great when those two align, and quite often they do, right? Maturing security defenses means investing in security companies that help mature security defenses, right? In order, a lot of their research and a lot of the best practices need a company, a commercial entity to be implemented, right? There was no MFA adopted on the scale at which it is today, until somebody like companies like Duo and companies like others just came in and said, okay, we're going to specialize, we're going to help MFA gain the market adoption. And all of that is true, but fundamentally VCs don't really owe anything, right? They're in it because that's the model that allows them to generate returns. And a part of the bet is also diversification, right? Different VCs construct their portfolios in different ways. And there is certainly a part that requires making big bets on big visions. But if you just bet on companies with big visions, you end up in a place where it's highly likely that all of them are going to fail, right? So you need to.
Ross, you bring up a great point, because I'm probably a little too much grandma and apple pie and wish everybody was like Ron Gula and Gula Tech, who's certainly has to make money for wants to make money, but has the big mission involved. And it's a great point, because
you see, but Ron is investing his own money, right?
Oh yes, a very good point. Yeah.
And so that changes.
Anyway, I won't get into naming and not naming others, but certainly that it's a very valid point, because at the end of the day, they have their job, we have ours, and we need to convince them or not. So really great point. So let's dig in a little bit more about the vendor ecosystem and what you would like to see happen. I'll just lead. You can go wherever you want with this, but on when you mentioned, let's say we're a vendor, we go in, we do this really well, we get our wedge, and then we want to start building around it. Tell us what your experience in your homework and what you're seeing out there on how that's working, and what you may like to see happen differently, if anything, on that process for vendors, whether, over promising, getting over their skis, not getting to work well with others. I'm just, how would you suggest the industry is maturing well or not along those lines?
That is a good question. It's also a big one. I think there are definitely several challenges. I mean, what you usually see with cybersecurity startups, the playbook is kind of kind of similar, more or less, right? You have a startup that identifies the initial wedge, goes after that initial market, and then tries to expand. Again, the vast majority are unable to do it or unable to satisfy the growth objectives and the growth expectations, and then end up struggling. Some are able to break through, identify the problem that does have a big market or big enough market, and that's where I think the reality is that although we all want to be tackling some cutting edge cybersecurity areas and attack vectors and so on and so forth. The reality is that if you look at companies that are big, if you look at startups that have a large market, they tend to tackle the markets that are really well understood, and they tend to tackle problems that are not new at all. Like you look at the identity space, you look at the endpoint security space, you look at the cloud security space, right? You look at the compliance space. All of those things have been around for a very long time. I think where many startups fail or struggle is at the point where they identify an initial niche or an initial sort of wedge, and what they're unable to do, they're unable to validate that there is a big enough market for what they're going to be offering. So what happens more often than not is that the startup gets initial traction, they get some design partners, like everything seems to be working well, and then they raise the next round, they raise Series A or Series B or wherever that is, only to realize that really they have exhausted the market. So they have to either move fast and try to expand into new areas, or at that point they have to try and see if they can get acquired, and so on and so forth. But even the acquisitions in the industry tend to happen when we are talking about point solutions, right? So if there is one product that solves one problem really, really well and does it for a large number of customers, that company is much likely to get acquired compared to somebody who, for example, solves like 5 different problems for their customers that are not fully related. There are a large number of challenges in the industry. A lot of the products are built in a way that makes them not interoperable with others. Like that's a big pain point. Like companies that build their products in such a way that makes it impossible to integrate with other tooling, to send the data outside to other tools. Yeah.
Let's go into that, because that's one of the examples I really wanted to get into and get your feedback and comment on it. Is there is this, and speaking about even fiduciary duty of an executive to your venture or your investors, whether it's venture, private equity, individual, whatever, it doesn't matter. This balance of, hey, I want to protect and defend my turf, and so maybe you put some on purpose. Part of your capability makes it much harder for your client to get rid of you. Mm-hmm. Because if you're, like, let's say, for example, just take a vulnerability scanner. I mean, the big 3 now are all doing a lot of acquisitions. People are nipping at their heels because just providing vulnerability scan information wasn't enough. In fact, our business is doing this as well. We are providing enrichment of data. We certainly need the scanner, but those scanners, if you stopped using the scanners dashboards and user interface and just had the data pipe someplace else, clearly the value would drop from that scanner. So everyone's trying to fight for face time, mm-hmm. and then in theory potentially make it harder, might choose to do this, to just use the data because it becomes commoditized if you're not in the UI. And that is a natural conflict for the industry, I believe, on, hey, that's why you're going to have 71 tools, 71 dashboards, 71 UIs, because everybody does want that. Not everybody, but wants the eyes on screen. And so, that idea of making it harder to work well with others to defend your turf, it just pull on that a little bit more for us.
Yeah, so I think there are several pieces there. One, I do genuinely believe that cybersecurity is one of those problems that cannot be solved by a single company, and for that reason, building cybersecurity products in a way that makes them not interoperable or hard to integrate with others it is just fundamentally a very bad way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Not for some kind of ethical considerations or how we should be doing business, but mostly for very pragmatic considerations. Like as a security solution, you're going to be brought into an environment that, as you've said, already has that 70 plus tools. So if you want to be successful, you need to be able to integrate with each of those tools.
Mm-hmm.
And for that reason, you will never be able to proactively build quote unquote connectors or integrations with each of the tools in everybody's environment. You have to build your solution in such a way that can be connected to other products in a way that is generic, right? So you can obviously pre-build some integration, but if you don't have an integration, the customer should be able to still like establish the connection and still leverage your tool in their existing ecosystem. So I think that the fact that some companies choose not to go that route is just a bad business decision, like nothing else. There is no explanation there. As for introducing the artificial obstacles to churn and to making the switching costs higher, and making sure that the customer is more likely to stick around with the solution. I think there are good ways to do it. Like for example, it's just I know SIM vendors and in general vendors that build their insights and define their value proposition around data do it quite well, right? Once you brought your data to a tool, even if tomorrow you decide to switch to another tool, you still have like 2 years worth of telemetry that is sitting in that tool that you've used before, and you cannot easily move that data. So you still need to use 2 products in parallel and switch between the screens if you want to do a query that, for example, captures the data from a year and a half ago. Or that there are ways to design products and to sort of make it more sticky naturally, but I don't think that anti-competitive practices and like straight out just making it hard for others to integrate is the right way to do it.
Got it. So first of all, I will, if there are any questions from our viewers, please feel free to put those in the chat. We'll try to get to those if we can here, and that's going to be a priority for us. So, Ross, where are we headed? What would you like to see? What anything that you think the audience would benefit from on how you are thinking or where things are going? I mean, obviously, there's huge consolidation going on, but there's still lots of new. Although I think I read an article you wrote that maybe it isn't as crowded as we all think, considering the size of the problem. So just speak about that a little bit too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I know it's very popular these days to talk about the industry consolidation and the fact that there's going to be a process that will lead us to having less vendors. I don't think it is quite as simple as some people assume. Consolidation is something that happens to every single industry, and it is a continuous process, right? So cybersecurity has been in the state of consolidation since the very first day the industry emerged. And the reality is that there's always going to be mergers and acquisitions, right? There are always going to be M&As that are leading to like less vendors. There are always going to be companies, frankly, going out of business, which is also something worth acknowledging. But the reality is that the number of new entrants is going to be higher anyway. So the number of new entrants in cybersecurity will outweigh the number of M&As and the number of companies going out of business. So the consolidation is a continuous process, but I don't think it's going to necessarily lead to fewer vendors. Over a long period of time, yes. In the short term, I don't think people will notice it as rapidly as as clearly as they suspect they will. At the same time, I do believe that there are a large number of hard problems that still need to be solved in cybersecurity. And so it is for that reason that I believe that this conversation that we've got, too many vendors or too many startups or too much venture capital flowing into cybersecurity, I don't think if it truly reflects the reality. In fact, I believe it doesn't. I do believe we need more cybersecurity founders determined to solve like really hard infrastructure layer cybersecurity problems. Like there is so much to be done no matter which area you look at. Now, that said, I do also believe that not just because somebody has the ability to raise capital doesn't necessarily mean that they will be able to solve the right problem. But that's just, like that's the same is true for any market, right? There is a process of natural selection. uh, 100 companies are going to be able to raise capital. Of those, like some will fail, some will pivot, some will end up like becoming service providers, some will like double down on the product side and I find that initial product market fit and expand from there. Like it's the process of natural selection. So I'm not too worried about it. It is true that buyers are overwhelmed with the number of cybersecurity tools. That said, I also believe that buyers have to be smart and decide what is it that they need, like what problems is it that they need to get solved, and then be smart about reaching out to those companies that are building solutions in the space where uh, they're concerned with, right? If buyers are going to be saying that, oh my God, there's so many tools, I don't know what to buy. Well, that to me is a problem, but that's not the startup related problem. It's a problem that stems from the fact that we probably don't fully understand what problems are there in our environments that we should be solving. So it's like a marketplace, right? When I go to the grocery store and I don't drink any of the sugary like drinks, for example. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't exist there. Like somebody else may very well find them useful. I go to the store, I just don't go to that aisle. I pass through it and I go, when I go and buy a carrot juice, because that's something that is more in line with my preferences. It is solving, carrot juice is solving the problem that I have, but maybe Coke or Pepsi or something else is solving a problem that somebody else has. So both of those solutions or both types of solutions have the right to exist. They have the right to be a part of the same marketplace. It's just they're targeting different people. And so if I am walking into a store and saying, "Oh my God, there are just so many options that I don't care about," like that's not the store's problem. That's my problem, right? I should be able to figure out what is it that I want to buy, and go and buy what I need.
You brought up something that, and I don't want to end on a negative note as we're down to just about 12 minutes left here, but it is something I want to share and get your take on. So as we were bringing SIO to market, our focus was small MSPs, and now that our products matured, we're going after the MSSPs that are perhaps larger, and very soon, and really starting now with our latest release, we believe we can provide real value and can provide value to the enterprise. But during that journey for us, one of the things that we encountered, we were supporting the sort of three big, market shareholders for vulnerability scanners: Qualys, Rapid7, and Tenable. And when we went into the smaller markets of MSPs or even the small MSSPs, very few, I think of the 100 and some we demoed, less than 2% were using one of the big guys because they're pretty expensive for smaller companies. And one of the things we discovered is when we were looking at to integrate and work with some of these other scanners is there was more than one, but certainly one that is a brand that people probably have heard of, certainly in that space, had a big brand, that we just refused to support because what it was providing was so incomplete data or even wrong data that it was providing our philosophy here is it's better to know you have bad security than have a false sense of security.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we're just choosing not to support some of these things. And what we also found is because in the services business as well, and this isn't true for everybody, so it's a little bit more than anecdotal, but this idea of, hey, I'm buying a tool, I'm going to rely on it. In theory, that makes sense. But when we started to peel the onion back and ask the question, like, well, here's this prioritization score that this particular, and this happened with many interactions and tools, here's the prioritization score, and go fix this vulnerability first if you're going to play that whack-a-mole versus talking about risk. And people didn't even understand what was making up the score, how it was being prioritized. And so when you think of the responsibility of the vendors, knowing that the level of expertise, and even really should they have to have the expertise if they're buying a tool to solve a problem for them, what's sort of your take on, is that widespread? Is it more anecdotal, like I've said, and just what's your opinion? What have you found out there in the market?
Yeah, I think vendors have responsibility to make sure that their products are easy to understand, like easy to comprehend, like they act in a way that is explainable. And you see that a lot in the context of AI, which is currently something that like everybody is talking about a lot in cybersecurity. Like one of the, like AI has been around for quite some time. Like what we're now talking about is a subset of AI, specifically large language models, but like different applications and different forms of it have existed for a long time. And like one of the challenges that cybersecurity has ran into with AI specifically was that people, like security practitioners, are skeptical of any kind of determinations that they cannot understand the reasoning for, right? Like when something happens and it's like a black box decision, people want to understand, okay, like what is it that made a tool to flag this specific activity as malicious, for example. And I think in a similar way, when something like when a security tool introduces a score of some kind, it's important to communicate to the customer, like, what are the factors that are considered for that score, right? What is it that makes that, like, what are some of the things that were evaluated, and which of those didn't were lower or higher than the metrics that the vendor expected, and like which enable them to determine that that's going to a specific number. I think the reality is vendors have the responsibility to make their products accessible, to make it easy for customers to understand what they're dealing with. But at the same time, the reality is that on the buyer's end, it's also important to be able to evaluate the tool. And if there is a startup or a product more broadly that does something in a way that is not explainable, that is just a black box, the best way to vote against it is to not to buy that solution, right? And I think as an industry, we have to become mature in multiple different ways. And one of those ways is that buyers have to be more willing and able to say no to tools that do not solve their problems. See, investors cannot be expected to do all the due diligence and to identify what tool solves the problem and what doesn't. Like the ultimate voters, the ultimate people who should be making that determination are the customers. So if a startup that isn't solving the right problem or isn't solving the right problem the right way is still able to acquire a ton of customers and continue growing, that highlights a different problem in the industry, in that we don't know what we're buying. We often don't know how to evaluate different tools, but that's the ecosystem level problem, right? So I think there is a lot that we need to do on everybody's side, but I'm optimistic. Like in general, you can see that the market today is much more mature than it was 3-4 years ago. You can see that even the bar for startups to become successful is going up. The bar, the expertise on the vendor side is increasing. So I'm optimistic about it.
So Ross, as we're wrapping up here, anything else that you wanted to just chat about, share with the group? I have one last question. If not, I've been tracking. I've got another place where I'm getting a couple text messages directly to me that I can ask a final question. But anything else you want to share or open up, since based on the conversation we've had today?
That's a good one. No, I don't think anything specific comes to mind. Those open-ended questions are always hard. So go ahead. Sure.
All right. So the direct one, the last one, and then we'll wrap up. When I was doing homework and prepping on this, I saw a post, and you had done another, webinar type situation where you were sharing that something along the lines of, hey, the clients who buy the tools have to use them. And so let's say you've got 71 tools, because I remember when I was doing homework and diligence on DarkLight, I went into a SOC of a very large organization. There were 5 full-time, 24/7 staff SOC, and they literally were just sort of clicking a space bar to clear alerts because they just could not keep up with the different tools. So in a great example of they weren't using them. They were just noise. So give a little bit about, do you clearly believe that's a problem? At least that's what I felt from your post. Tell us about that and where that comes from.
Yeah, so there has been a report. I don't remember exactly who the author is, and I don't think I will be able to look it up quickly. But there has been a report essentially saying that the vast majority of the security breaches could have been prevented by the tools enterprises already have in their environment. And I have an article in Venture in Security, in my Venture in Security blog, that is titled something along the lines of, tools alone won't save you, but if you have tools, why don't you at least use them?
Yes.
And that's the message that I do come back to quite often, because the reality is that, like, if you follow the news, and if you just follow the news and the breakdowns of the cybersecurity breaches, you eventually come to realize that the vast majority of breaches didn't happen because there was like a very like a 0-day got exploited in an environment that was otherwise configured incredibly well. Instead, it's all the stupid things. It's like, hey, we've got a tool X, but we've deployed it on all of our endpoints, but we never enabled the policy coverage. Or we bought the tool Y and we've deployed it in our environment, but we only enabled 25% of the coverage. Or we bought a tool X, and we've deployed it in our environment, but not on like 5 servers that actually matter. So the reality is that most of the breaches happen precisely not because of the lack of tools, but because people are not using those tools well. They don't allocate enough time to configure those tools, and the vendors themselves are not including default configurations and the most secure configurations as a default option. Instead, customers have to go and like sift through the documentation to even figure out, okay, how is it that we should be using this tool? So there is a lot that we can do better, but that is a real problem. It's not so much the lack of tools, it's the need to use what the companies buy.
Ross, that's a great way to end. And one last plug for you here. It's not for you. You don't necessarily need it, but this is a great resource base for folks in the industry, whether you're a vendor, startup founder, et cetera. This is a great place to go, theventureinsecurity.net. Just pop in your email there and you'll get the stuff that I get in my box as Ross puts it out. Ross, can't thank you enough for taking the time to spend with DarkLight and the Empowered Defender. And we are very excited to call you a friend of the firm. And again, thanks for doing this today.
Thank you so much, Dan. Always a pleasure.
Information if you want to chat with us. And as I said, theventureinsecurity.net is a great place to learn more about Ross and get access to the stuff that he's doing for the industry. So with that, thank you all for attending, and we look forward to seeing you on May 8th. We'll be getting out the topic. I'm running out of time here, but we're getting out the topic for our next webinar. I think we're going to have another good guest. But one last thank you to Ross. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.